Pack 19 of Special Projects begins, and of course this is day one, build number one of said Special Projects pack. This is an interesting build because although none of you will really have much of a point of reference here, I've actually had this build waiting for probably the entire time I've been doing the series. And the benefit of that, in a crazy kind of way, is this car has single-handedly shown me at least just how wildly the physics and the handling have changed through Gran Turismo 7's life cycle. In fact, at least off the top of my head, I can't think of any other game that I've played which has had such a wild change in physics, handling, and I guess you could say realism, or at the very least in terms of how cars respond to tuning and upgrades, as GT7 has had. It's actually quite crazy. So what I've tried to do here is adjust the car for the much heavier recent change in physics, which we've seen in 1.57 and 1.58, to try and build it in such a way that it's not going to require a crazy swing in the opposite direction if they change things back a bit again. Because when I first built this car, it was slippery and twitchy. Now, it's the total opposite, and the build hasn't really changed all that much beyond what I've had to do to almost counteract the fact of how much heavier vehicles are now. And it seems, as I've kind of alluded to before a couple of times, that a lot of that is to do with the suspension and the ride height in particular, which for some weird reason they felt the need to radically change yet again, which has thrown a lot of builds out of whack and a lot of cars out of whack. As far as this one goes, of course, we are building a vehicle which has been featured in some other games. It was featured in Forza, the GT version, GT2, more specifically, of the Ferrari F430. Now we are using for reference Forza as the build, the weight, the horsepower. So if you're not a fan of Forza, you could go for real life numbers, I guess, but it's just an easy point of reference, and at the same time a nice little walk down memory lane for those who do enjoy those older Forza games and various other titles as well. So as far as the build itself, of course you want your stage 1 weight. I'll just double check on the ultimate section. So you've got here stage 5. But you don't really need to do that because, as you can see, it weighs more than that anyway. So unless you specifically want to adjust, the split of weight, if you will, which is not necessary either because, again, we're using Forza as the reference there, I really don't think you need the extra expense of doing that at the 300 grand level. So if we jump back down to here, I've gone, as I said, for stage 1 weight. It has the sports hards, of course, already fitted, so you don't need to worry about those. Stage 2 weight as well, the power restrictor and ballast. For the semi-racing stuff, of course, the fully customized ECU, the limited slip diff, the stage 3 weight reduction as well. I've opted not to do the rigidity. You could. It lowers your points a bit, so, I guess if you want to build it to a point level and have different horsepower or weight, you could use that to an advantage. We've got the racing filter, the silencer, the manifold, the pads, and of course the discs. We've got the clutch and flywheel, naturally the suspension, the transmission, stage 4 weight, relatively rare option, but any car that has the extreme level 5 will of course have level 4 as well. We've got the racing hard tyres fitted, of course. For the extreme stuff, it actually doesn't have the steering angle adapter, which, obviously, I can't say this for a fact because I haven't done it, but if you do find it a bit too much on the understeer side, at least for the moment, until they invariably change the physics again somewhere down the line, it might be worth buying that to make the steering a little bit better on the turn-in. Like I said, I haven't tried it, so it might not make enough of a difference, but it could be worth a try. And then for the ultimate section, of course, we already showed you there. Now, as it turns out, it's well below 700 points, even with the race car numbers, so not bad. You could use it potentially as some kind of cash cow build if you wanted to adjust the power or the weight levels. And like I said, we are using Forza as the reference, which is a 45-55 split, 1195 kilos and 504 horsepower. So nothing too crazy by today's standards, but a very fun idea, at least for a car. Of course, we'll take it out to the track in a second to see how it stacks up. As far as the build, pretty big difference on suspension height between the front and the rear. 85mm on the front, 115 on the back. If I recall, I think I actually took it up a little bit for that same reason that I said earlier on about having a weird response these days to ride height in particular. We've got 5 on the anti-roll, 30 and 40 on the dampers, 3.4 for the spring, so pretty high on that one, 2 degrees of camber, 0.10 out toe on the front, 20, or 0.20, I should say, in on the rear. For the diff, 10, 10 and 30. I personally find that to be good enough at the moment with those very understeery physics. But again, like I said, I didn't want to kind of build the car in such a way that, as some of the older projects have been, they've kind of been totally thrown out of whack, as I know some of you have said before, and I may have to update some of those in future, but I didn't want that to happen this time, where, you know, if they backtrack those physics and then it goes from one extreme to the other, I didn't want it to essentially become a useless build. So you could change that if you want to, but I'll go with that for now, at least personally, and just work with the understeer. As far as the transmission, 300 kilometers an hour, so up around 180, 190-ish miles an hour. As far as the ballast, 35 kilos, put that all the way to the front. As far as the ECU, restrict that down to 91%. I'm running the full downforce for this one. Of course, that'll depend on you and the track you're taking it on, etc. And then over here, of course, you can see the relatively few things which we've actually fitted. So, as always, we'll take it out to the track, and I'll show you what the car can do in practice. Now, the problem with the notes on this one is that I would say more so than any other vehicle in this pack, because this one has been built and in my garage, and to be honest, used by me more often than many of my other builds, it's a car which I've seen have such a wild change in its arc of how it handles and how it performs that whatever I say now, by the time 1.59 arrives, that could change anyway, because they could backtrack what they've done, they could readjust it as they have, and this, as I said, is a perfect example of how it goes from one extreme to the other, so I'm hoping that they don't change it in some way that ruins the build down the line. For now, it is heavier through corners, and I would recommend, more so than ever, braking before you enter a corner. You know, sometimes you can kind of brake pretty much when you want to, partway through the corner, midway through, whatever. With this one, and with a few others as well, you do have to brake a bit earlier than before to counteract the understeer. If you do want to change it completely, you know, go experimental on the suspension, maybe raise the ride height a little bit, change up the diff if you want to, by all means go for it, and then you can always use this as a baseline to come back to if you don't like it. Of course, that's the advantage of a video like this one. It is a pretty iconic racing version of the F430, itself already a pretty damn popular car from this era. So of course, if you stick around for the rest of the week, I hope you enjoy the other builds. Another one coming later on today, of course, and until next time, I'll see you then. But for now, thanks for watching.